If you have a scraping noise coming from your vehicle like this while your vehicle is moving, you could potentially have a serious safety issue and the brakes might be the culprit. My name's Len from 1A Auto. Let's diagnose and fix this together. Now, just taking a quick peek at this, I can tell that the rotor is extremely rotted. That tells me that the vehicle's either been sitting for an extremely long period of time or it has a braking issue. But keep in mind, whenever you're looking through the wheel to do a quick brake inspection, you're only looking at the outside braking surface. The inside might be the issue. Before we start tearing this apart, a quick note about replacing your brakes. If you did find that you had an issue with the pads and rotors on one side of the vehicle, it's important to make sure that you replace both sides of the vehicle at the same time. It doesn't make any sense to have something new on one side of the vehicle and something old on the other. If you find that you have multiple issues going on in this one area, go to 1aauto.com and order yourself a kit, which will offer all the related parts. Alright, so let's start tearing this apart and get into the diagnosis process. Safely raise and support your vehicle. If you're only lifting up the front or the rear, make sure whichever wheels are on the ground are locked in position with something such as a chalk block of some sort. Assuming all four wheels are off the ground, we'll just continue on. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our braking surface. As you can tell, it's in very poor condition. You can also see the outer brake pad fairly clearly. This one's actually worn almost metal to metal. To start taking this apart, it's important to start at the bleeder screw. The reason why is because in case this breaks, you know for sure you will have to replace the caliper. The reason why you have to open up that bleeder screw is because we will have to push back the caliper pistons, which are inside this area. You want to make sure this is open so you do not force fluid up inside the brake lines. Let's go ahead and open this up. Now, once you see a steady trickle of fluid coming out of this, you can go ahead and close up that bleeder screw temporarily. By having a steady trickle of fluid coming out of there, that tells me that I do not have an issue with the flex hose. If there was no fluid coming out, there could be an issue with the flex hose or the caliper. Let's continue on with a collection receptacle. I have it on a hose here directly to the bleeder screw. At this point, we'll open up the bleeder screw, allow the fluid to start making its way through here, and then we'll push back the caliper piston. To do that, I'll just make my way right in between this area and gently start prying. Now, if you found that when you were trying to push this back, the caliper did not move, that typically means you're having an issue with the slider pins along here, or even potentially the piston inside of this area. I'll show you that once the caliper's off. Let's go ahead and close up that bleeder screw. Make sure no air gets inside of the system here. We don't want to cause any contamination. Carefully remove the caliper. Now that we have that off of there, it's important to make sure that you clearly inspect the caliper piston, especially along this dust boot. If you were to see any type of fluid coming from here, that means that the boot internally on the caliper itself is damaged. This boot right here is essentially just a dust boot. There should be no fluid anywhere near this. The seal is actually located internally. This caliper actually looks okay, and the piston pushed in as it should. Let's go ahead and carefully set this aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose. Let's move along to the caliper bracket sliders. You should have 2 of these. For each of those, you can take hold of them, carefully pull them out of place. Give them a quick inspection. Generally on these, you should find that they have some sort of lubricant. If it looks like it's rusted or rotted, or even it was binding inside of this area, that is going to cause a brake restriction. Let's go ahead and pull those right out of place. We'll give them a quick inspection and we can set those aside. Let's move along to removing the brake pads from the area. Sometimes you might find that you have some sort of spring. Go ahead and remove that. That essentially just helps push the brake pads away from the rotor when you release the brake pedal. Continuing on, we'll be removing the pads from the area. You can use a small pry bar. They should want to fall right out of place. If you find that you had to use a hammer and a chisel of any sort, typically that means that they were frozen in the bracket and that can potentially cause this issue. Ooh, wow, that one's real bad. At this point, let's continue on to removing the bracket from the area. There should be 2 mounting bolts along the backside holding it to the steering knuckle. There we are. Now, there really isn't too much to say about the bracket as far as this noise, but when you do go to do a brake job, you're going to want to make sure that you clean up the mating surfaces and inside of each one of the ports. Now that I have everything stripped down off of here, I'm going to continue on by taking hold of the brake rotor and give it a quick spin while holding it against the hub. I want to ensure that I don't have a scraping noise coming from the backing plate. All right, I've got no noise here. Once you've confirmed that there's no noise coming from the rotor and the backing plate, the last thing we'll do is pay attention to the flex hose while we're on this side of the vehicle. That's the area that goes between the caliper and the brake line. Typically, this will be made out of rubber. You want to go ahead and flex it a little bit, see if it's dry rotted and cracked or stiff and firm in any way. If you see any swelling or the like, that flex hose needs to be replaced. At this point, you want to go over to the other side of the vehicle and give it the exact same inspection. Confirm that the bleeder screw opens. There is fluid flow coming through that flex hose. The flex hose is soft and pliable, the caliper is not leaking, and that the issue is only the pads and rotors. With that out of the way, let's make sure this is nice and clean. Move along to the caliper bracket. Typically, you might find that you have some sort of anti-vibration shim on here. Let's go ahead and make our way in between there. These can come in different shapes and sizes. Now that all four of those mating surfaces are clean, the next thing we'll do is use some parts cleaner directly inside of each of our slider ports. Let's move along to cleaning our slider pins. When doing so, you always want to remove the boot, give it a quick inspection, make sure it's not torn, worn, or damaged. Moisture in this area will cause a serious braking issue. Clean the pin, give it a close inspection, make sure it's not rotted in any way that might restrict the movement. That would be common along this area, but you do also want to inspect up inside this groove here. Clean the boot. After you have this clean, we'll go ahead and put everything together. Lubricate your slider. Take our slider boot, slide that right on there. Take this and put it inside your slider port. Press the boot onto the caliper bracket itself. Double check to make sure it's completely secure. Do the same on the other side. Now we can move along to our mounting points. Use a little bit of high temperature lubricant here. Install your tins. Time for the brake pads. Go ahead and slide them in and make sure they move freely. Since our brake pads had these clips, we're going to insert those now. Doing so, you want to make sure you're holding onto the brake pads or else they're going to pull away from the rotor. Let's take that caliper and put it in place. Continue on with your 2 caliper slider bolts. Double check to make sure the bleeder screw is nice and tight. Close your cap. Double check everything and reinstall your wheel. Torqued. No noise now. Once you've completed this service, it's important to make your way under the hood to the master cylinder and top it off with the manufacturer's specified brake fluid. Now, I hope you liked the video. I hope you found it interesting. If there's something in this video that you think might help somebody, go ahead and share it with them. If you like the video or even love the video, go ahead and smash on that like button for me. It would mean the world. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe, ring the bell. That way there you, all of your friends, can be kept up with all of our latest content. Thanks.